Welcome back, guys. It's time for another episode and you'll want to buckle up for this one. It's London from Mortal Engines the movie. Peter Jackson goes from running around Middle-earth to driving around Muddy Earth, giving us an adaptation of the popular novel Mortal Engines, by resigning himself to magicking up 3 movies from one Hobbit book, while he flogged off the bulk of the production work for his passion project. Mortal Engines is an impressive visual spectacle offering a token exploration of complex issues, such as imperialism, classism, the excesses of capitalism, environmental degradation, and the clash between antiquated Western and Eastern values, served up via the nuanced vehicle of a gargantuan monster truck destruction derby and an epic new Great Wall. It's a steampunk Star Wars, complete with a devastating super weapon, a plucky nerf herder rebellion, and an orphan with a mysterious background. Only this time the parental twist is boringly obvious.
You already knew.
Is that better than having a murderous zombie Terminator for a dad? Man, this girl has trouble with fathers. But Hester did have better luck with her looks, considering her facial disfigurement was drastically toned down for the movie. The filmmakers apparently caving to humanity's innate disgust of ugly people, because no one could possibly love that mug. That would be too unrealistic, unlike this. Then we have aspiring loverboy Tom, played by Robert Sheehan, who's gone from opposing Valentine in the Mortal Instruments to opposing Valentine in Mortal Engines. Huh? But the real star of the show is this monstrosity. London spends its days cruising around predating on other smaller traction cities, and like its stationary forebearer, filling its museum with artifacts that don't belong to them. Except these minions, who are at least an IP owned by the production company, forced onto us in one of the most painfully awkward movie references I think I've ever witnessed. And that's not the only thing that stands out around here, because all of this noise is built on an ideological foundation which is sketchy to say the least, perfectly summed up by the movie's undercover distribution title, Squeaky Wheels. Point 1. Municipal Darwinism, the Darwin Award winner of fictional ideologies. Municipal Darwinism is an idea subscribed to by the government of London and much of the population of the Mortal Engines world, and it's the stupidest, most self-defeating ideology we've encountered since Necroism. Municipal Darwinism seeks to create a technological ecosystem where larger, faster, and more powerful traction cities prey on smaller, slower, less powerful towns, and many of them in turn prey on smaller settlements, and so on and so forth. And that's it. That's about as deep as it goes.
I submit that is a faulty premise.
I mean, hey, I get it. It's an intentionally stupid ideology serving as a criticism of social Darwinism and other unscientific belief systems. It represents mankind's futile efforts to appropriate a natural system and transplant it onto an artificial human world for the purpose of justifying certain political, social, or economic agendas. Municipal Darwinism also serves as a fanciful idea to build a fantasy universe around. It's meant to be accepted, not dissected. That's all fair enough, but none of that will stop me from dragging it through the mud. Municipal Darwinism is less a circle of life, more a one-directional nosedive straight down the gurgler. It has about as much in common with Darwinian evolution as intelligent design or robot fighting. It attempts to mimic survival of the fittest, but misses several crucial factors that allows evolution to chug along indefinitely. The most concerning of which is that successful predator and prey cities do not go on to reproduce.
In the great game of survival, this is checkmate.
Instead, the predators expend massive amounts of resources to roll around hoovering up more resources, filling their coffers temporarily and increasing their size while producing nothing of worth. And the superior prey cities will all be caught eventually, no matter how fast or fit they might be. Even if there is the occasional new town or city popping up, I doubt they could be built fast enough to outstrip the rate at which they're consumed. These entropy engines, many of which are apparently bigger than London, are also exclusive cannibals, preying on cities that for all intents and purposes are the same species as them. The only herbivores, so to speak, being the mining towns who obtain their resources without predating anything. If it was just us them zipping around, there wouldn't be nearly as many issues. But as it is now, it's an unsustainable system offering diminishing returns, which should have been destined to collapse very quickly. But shockingly enough, in the movie universe, it's defied the odds, chugging along for up to 1,000 years and for far longer in the books. I would have given these mortal engines a human lifespan at most. It's the Highlander of evolutionary struggles. Eventually there can be only one traction city, at which point the population would have no choice but to settle down and finally end this ridiculous ideology, while the stationary, more remote and well-protected settlements will ultimately be the meek who shall inherit the earth. It'd be better to just find a mountainous area and lay down some roots now. What's the point of all this?
The answer to that question would seem to be self-evident.
When we see them in the movie, prey are already becoming scarce, and what few towns remain aren't exactly flush with resources. But at the furthest point in the book timeline, as anticipated, the traction cities do indeed become a thing of the past. But how did these things get off the ground in the first place? So 1,000 or so years ago, another stupid civilization not too dissimilar from our own popped off a bunch of quantum superweapons, shattering the Earth's crust and destroying the world as we know it.
I'm more stupid than people today. They just had far worse weapons.
An event so cataclysmic it even managed to wipe out the apocalypse-resistant landmass of New Zealand. A New Zealand-US co-production, and they still leave us off the damn map. Though to be fair, not even American civilization survived this one. According to the novels, traction cities were seen as a logical response to the geological instability caused by this event. Okay. But Shangguo and other cities stand as testament that none of this destructive BS is remotely necessary. If we go further into book lore, London itself deserves the lion's share of the blame for getting this whole municipal Darwinism thing started. Apparently inspired by mobile fortresses from the Middle East, they took it to its next illogical level, acquiring the necessary technology, building the first predatory traction city, and inventing the ideology which quickly swept the world. Though I guess other cities didn't have much choice once this behemoth started rolling around gobbling up everything.
It's either this or you can drink your own urine.
But by the time we encounter them in the movie, there are other more immediate concerns aside from their illogical ideology, which could end London before it has the chance to conk out naturally. Point 2. London mismanages its resources and labour. Its policies risk rebellion and destruction. London combines the magical mobility of Howl's Moving Castle with the overt class structure of Final Fantasy VII's Midgar, the favoured of their society living on the higher tiers and the lower classes relegated to the bottom. And also like Midgar, London had an upper tier collapse, literally crushing the poor people below, which in terms of a thematic exploration of classism is about as bold as it gets. Ideas that were more thoroughly fleshed out in the novels have been reduced to a Victorian England paint job. But there is one hint that their societal system might be negatively affecting London's greater operations, and that's in their treatment of Tom, made an orphan after his parents were killed in the tier collapse, which for some unspoken reason seems to have affected his upward mobility.
I thought you wanted to be an aviator.
Oh, I did, but then my parents died.
Once an aspiring aviator, Tom was thrown in with the historians, a role he's reluctantly embraced. Perhaps you need the right connections or financial sponsorship to become a pilot. So in other words, the state has failed to create a pipeline for talent and marginalize quality candidates. After the bare minimum in terms of training, Tom proves himself to be a proficient aviator. Pity he's now flying for London's enemies. And the talentless trust fund pilots they've ended up with are so vacant, they'll just sit there while an enemy aircraft is buzzing around. We don't get too much of an insight into the lives of common London folk. They're subjected to this horrible algae-based gruel, but then it's hard to feel sorry for them when, like their upper-class counterparts, many seem to thoughtlessly support the state's destructive agenda. Citizen morale becomes less of an issue when the population are this inherently stupid. Though I would suggest London is importing potential subversive elements every time they ingest a new town, rather than dropping off these disgruntled people at the nearest mountain range. They choose to absorb these populations. These people have just been forcibly relocated, had all their possessions stolen and their homes destroyed, and now they're probably going to be assigned menial, soul-crushing jobs on London's lower tiers. They've gone from masters of their own kingdom to low-class nobodies. Insurrection would surely be inevitable. As for London's resource management, before we can offer anything in the way of criticism, first we need to accept that a city this size could grow enough food to feed its population, and find find enough resources to fuel its engine, which is somehow powerful enough to move London's astonishing weight, without crushing its tracks or tearing itself apart.
Does not conform to the known laws of physics.
As if municipal Darwinism wasn't hard enough to swallow.
Prepare to ingest.
But even within the context of the fantasy world that allows all this to function, London's resource management has finally seen it run into serious trouble. Having crossed a land bridge from Britain to roam the great hunting grounds of Eurasia, London is finding prey scarce and is steadily running out of the necessities.
Running low on food, fuel, basic resources. We can't survive out here much longer.
Wasting their time harassing salt miners, prey that can't begin to satiate their needs.
Usual store of brick, coal and iron, and 75 tons of salt.
Barely enough fuel to last us a week.
The Lord Mayor views this expedition as a mistake,
We should never have gone into Europe. Biggest mistake we ever made.
which to me suggests they left adequate prey back in Britain. Either that, or they were just sitting in one place conserving their resources in denial about the sustainability of traction cities. Once they finally catch up with their prey, they salvage what they can and then just incinerate all the buildings. Surely there were better uses for these materials. I suppose they have to throw something in this thing, maybe those trees you just ran over. That seems a bit more viable than generating power from burning scrap metal.
I suggest we increase the ventilation in the cargo bay before we are asphyxiated.
But the most catastrophic flaw in London's operation has to be the furnace itself. Completely unshielded and with not much in the way of security even during wartime. It's a Death Star level Achilles heel and you won't need space magic or an exhaust port to blow this thing. It's conveniently located at the rear of the prey intake chamber and it takes one missile to do the job. London should have already been stopped in its tracks long ago due to an anti-tractionist bomb or an incoming prey town firing off its arsenal. After all the nonsense we've been subjected to, the long-term survival of this furnace could be the most unbelievable thing about London.
Oh, come on!
But as with most stupid sci-fi civilizations, the root cause of these issues lies with their terrible leadership. Point 3. London is brought to ruin by its short-sighted, reckless leadership. They're the Dumb and Dumber of villainous duos, both failing to learn the lessons of history and both with logic so profoundly warped they could have definitely had their own double feature in Villains Too Stupid to Win. We've got this guy, Lord Mayor Magnus Crome, who buys into municipal Darwinism wholesale and is the probable source of most of London's flaws. And this confused prick, Thaddeus Valentine, a murderous nihilist with a severe case of cognitive dissonance who buys into municipal Darwinism by complete accident. Valentine claims to reject their traditional ideology.
Municipal Darwinism. It's a dying system. Prey has all but gone.
Which would make you think he'd want to pack up London and go live with the anti-tractionists. But no, he hates them too. He's furious at Shangguo for properly managing their resources.
Then why do they hide behind the shield wall hoarding their resources? They mean to see us starve out here, Kate.
The nerve of those people. Valentine has a secret plan to resurrect a quantum superweapon using ancient technology that has no business being operational. But to be fair, that's not the only post-apocalypse cliche around here.
It's on Inky.
It's over 1,000 years old.
This weapon will allow Valentine to tear down the wall so he can steal all of Shangguo's stuff.
London must now look beyond municipal Darwinism and move into a new age. Tonight, we set a course for the savage heartland of the Anti-Traction League. The lands beyond will become our new hunting ground.
Which he seems to think stands at odds with municipal Darwinism when it's quite obviously a more destructive continuation of their ideology and offers nothing in the way of a long-term solution. And he presumably planned all this without genuinely investigating whether Medusa could be repurposed for energy generation. That could have been a game changer. But there are some hidden reasons for this guy's inconsistent nature. He's taken a few cues from the Joker.
Dinosaur.
What does that make you?
I'm the meteor.
And in true vanilla villain fashion, he's after power for power's sake.
Nothing can stand in the face of this.
The man who controls this controls the world.
You didn't do this for any noble cause. You did it for yourself, for the power that it gave you.
His oppositional stance to official policy perhaps serving as a means of undermining the Lord Mayor, which isn't that hard considering Magnus is a terrible political operator. He's raised Valentine up from nothing, lets him plaster his personalized propaganda all over London, and is well aware of Thaddeus's ambitions.
Thaddeus Valentine. the great archaeologist, man of the people. I raised you up. I can tear you down.
He then offers nothing in the way of leadership himself, content for London to zoom around like a lost Roomba that can't find its charging port.
His resources are extremely limited, and the situation on the surface is chaotic.
He lets Thaddeus surround himself with loyalists and divert resources to the supposed energy project. And he's never even bothered to go inside London's most prominent building to see what Valentine is really up to.
I've spent 15 years developing this power system.
Meanwhile, Valentine has been busy purchasing archaic tech from scav traders while failing to gather everything that's organically coming in through London's jaws. Then, during his off hours, he's recklessly turning up to the latest rebel induction for a bit of a PR stunt. A strategy that predictably gets him a knife in the gut. I'm not sure how this guy has maintained a positive public image for so long, because he leaves a trail of witnesses to all his horrific crimes. Later on, with his super weapon ready for deployment, Valentine makes his power play against the Lord Mayor, changing London's course, now heading towards Shangguo.
We're executing the new order, sir.
Whose order?
And so Magnus finally gets his hackles up, turning up to St. Paul's to confront this obvious threat to his power, alone.
Shut this down!
Leaving Thaddeus free to unleash devastation on Shangguo. Risking overload to fire a third time, did he just see what this weapon is capable of?
Wait! Temperatures have to stabilize!
Prepare to fire!
Maybe err on the side of caution, buddy.
Core temperature critical.
Deploy system override. Fire again! One more strike, that wall comes down.
Luckily, the initial blast managed to take out most of the enemy fleet because London's anti-air defenses are so minimal, this small air force was enough to take them all out, allowing Anna and Hester to slip into St. Paul's and sabotage Medusa with a failsafe flash drive. Thaddeus and his scientist lady should know this technology better than anyone else, yet they couldn't shove a piece of gum in that port or something. Even Tom was aware of this device. In a desperate and characteristically illogical last play, Thaddeus has all the drivers in the wheelhouse killed and sets London on a collision course with the remnants of the wall. So are you an anti-tractionist now? Because that sure sounds like a great way to stop London for good.
You're an idiot.
Of course, he doesn't bother stationing anyone in the wheelhouse when he's well aware there are enemies around, now including another estranged daughter of his, leaving Tom and his one puny missile to finally stop this technological abomination once and for all, though thankfully London had just enough traction left to poetically crush Valentine, as was subtly foreshadowed near the start of the movie. So the remnants of London are left to rust in the monster truck graveyard, serving as the largest warning against the enemies of Shangguo. And although it potentially could have been restarted in a sequel, considering the box office performance of Mortal Engines, it'll probably remain dead before it's even got through the gate, just like this movie franchise. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you disagree with both anti-tractionism and municipal Darwinism, and don't forget to like the St. Paul's Energy Project.